Imagine you have this crushing, unexplainable fatigue.
Right.
Like your hair is thinning, maybe even falling out in clumps in the shower.
Which is terrifying.
Exactly. So you go to the doctor, they draw your blood, they run a test, and they look you right in the eye and say, you know, your numbers are totally normal. It is probably just stress.
It happens every single day.
But what if I told you that test was actively lying to them?
Yeah.
What if the doctor fell for a massive, well-documented cognitive trap? And what if a rogue artificial intelligence built by a lineage of priest healers, of all things, could have accurately diagnosed you while you were just sitting on your living room couch?
It is a profound shift in how we view authority in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've been conditioned to see a lab report as an unquestionable truth, right? Almost like a mathematical absolute.
Yeah, like 2 + 2 = 4.
Exactly. But the reality of diagnosis is fraught with subjective bias, economic pressures, and honestly, massive systemic blind spots.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today, we are untangling a really massive, fascinating, and frankly, somewhat unsettling knot at the intersection of AI, healthcare economics, and patient empowerment.
It is a huge topic.
It really is. We are looking at a tale of two vastly different medical AI platforms that bizarrely share the exact same name, Dr. Maya and MayaMD.
Right.
And we are going to explore why mixing these two up isn't just a branding issue. It perfectly illustrates the ongoing turf war over who really controls your health data, your diagnosis, and ultimately your freedom as a patient.
And to get to the bottom of this, we are synthesizing a huge stack of source material today. We have corporate PR releases and technical overviews on the AI side.
A lot of tech jargon in those.
Oh, tons of it.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We're also examining a rather provocative YouTube documentary transcript detailing what the creators refer to as the medical monopoly.
That one gets intense.
It really does. And then we are going to dive deep into peer-reviewed articles, focusing on the actual mechanics of clinical reasoning, like how doctors actually think. And finally, we will look at highly specific clinical guidelines from the UK's National Health Service regarding iron deficiency and anemia.
So it's a towering stack of reading.
Yeah, it is.
But our goal here is to clearly define the philosophical and technological split between what the industry calls B2B, business-to-business clinical AI, and patient-empowering AI.
Right.
And then we're going to show you, the listener, exactly why you desperately need this level of health literacy. We are diving into the surprisingly tricky world of interpreting your own diagnostic tests.
Because once you see how the medical matrix is built, you realize you simply cannot afford to passively ride along anymore.
No, you really can't. So if we connect this to the bigger picture, understanding the contrast between these two distinct AIs sets the stage for everything we will discuss today.
Let's start with this tale of two Mayas.
Sure.
Because to a casual observer or, a distressed patient searching an app store, they sound nearly identical.
MayaMD and Dr. Maya.
Right. But they serve entirely different masters.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with MayaMD. When I was reading through their platform overviews and corporate materials, it reads like a pitch to Wall Street, not a letter to a sick patient.
Exactly.
What exactly is it, and who is it built for?
So MayaMD is fundamentally a B2B clinical AI platform. Its target audience is not the individual sitting at home feeling unwell.
It's not for you and me.
No, it is engineered and marketed directly to traditional healthcare providers, physical clinics, and these massive health systems.
Yeah.
Its core philosophy, as explicitly outlined in their own literature, is institutional optimization.
Institutional optimization? That sounds expensive.
Very. It is designed to integrate seamlessly into existing clinical workflows to make the current healthcare system more efficient. And the sources are very transparent here. Efficiency is essentially a direct synonym for profitability.
I noticed that. The sources highlight some incredibly specific financial metrics they use to sell this software to hospital administrators. They aren't just talking about abstract health outcomes.
No, they're pitching hard numbers.
Yeah. The ability to lower hospital readmissions by 31%, reduce patient intake times by 40%, and there is this very striking claim about increasing monthly revenue for medical practices by upwards of $40,000.
Which is a staggering value proposition for a clinic. It acts as an engine of efficiency for the institution. Now, looking under the hood of MayaMD, the tech stack relies on what they call a neurosymbolic AI approach.
Wait, neurosymbolics, let's pause there. Because whenever I hear about generative AI, like the chatbots everyone uses now, it's usually just predicting the next most likely word in a sentence.
Right, large language models.
Yeah, which means it hallucinates all the time. It makes things up. If an AI hallucinates a medical diagnosis, I mean, someone could die.
Absolutely.
So are you saying they put some sort of digital shock collar on the AI using hard math so it can't just guess?
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it, actually. Pure generative AI is way too fluid, too creative for clinical liability. You can't have it making things up.
Right.
So neurosymbolic AI essentially binds the generative conversational ability of the AI to a strict framework of deterministic symbolic logic.
Like a rules engine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a rigid rules engine running in the background. The goal is to constrain the AI to ensure absolutely zero hallucinations. It only says what the pre-programmed medical logic allows it to say.
Which obviously protects the hospital from massive malpractice lawsuits.
And it also allows them to deploy tools like their companion AI.
Oh, right, the remote monitoring thing.
Yes. This is a feature meant for remote patient monitoring. It tracks vitals, blood pressure, heart rate, and symptom progression at home. But it feeds all that structured data directly back to the medical assistants and the billing departments at the clinic.
So it's essentially tethering the patient to the hospital. You're just doing it through a digital leash. You are still fully inside their system, generating billable data points. Okay, now let's flip the script. Introduce us to the other AI in the source material, Dr. Maya, sometimes referred to as Dr. Maya GPT.
Right.
Who built this and why?
Here is where the stark contrast emerges. Dr. Maya was created by Dr. Katyali Srivatsa. He is a pediatric intensive care specialist in the UK, so he has an extensive high-stakes clinical background.
He's not just a tech guy.
No, he's a frontline physician. But the documentary sources highlight an origin story that goes far beyond traditional medical school. He actually belongs to a familial lineage of priest healers in the Brahmin tradition.
That is a wildly different origin story than a Silicon Valley tech startup trying to optimize billing codes.
It is a completely different worldview.
Yeah.
In that tradition, priest healers are considered guardians of complex knowledge systems, and their primary mandate is the welfare of the society, not the accumulation of capital. Yeah, and that philosophy deeply informs the entire architecture of his tool. Dr. Maya's target audience is directly you, the patient. Its core philosophy is to entirely bypass the traditional profit-driven medical establishment.
Just cut them right out.
Exactly. It aims to provide direct health literacy to the individual, stripping away the gatekeeping.
The sources mention it was specifically built to combat fear-driven healthcare. They use this really fascinating term, cyberchondria.
Cyberchondria is a very modern phenomenon, and it's a huge problem. A patient feels a minor symptom, they Google it, the search engine feeds them the most extreme, catastrophic possibilities.
Like you have a headache and Google tells you it's a brain tumor.
Right, and their anxiety just spikes. This panic drives them to make an unnecessary emergency room visit, and the traditional medical system highly monetizes that panic. They will run a battery of expensive tests to provide the reassurance the patient is desperately seeking.
And beyond just the financial cost to the patient, the sources claim Dr. Maya is trying to solve a massive biological issue, which is the overprescription of antibiotics.
Which is a primary driver of global antimicrobial resistance. It's a huge crisis.
Because people just want a pill to feel better.
Yeah, when a panicked patient arrives at a clinic with a viral infection, which antibiotics cannot treat at all, the doctor often feels pressured to, do something to validate the visit and calm the patient down. So they prescribe an antibiotic.
Just to get them out the door.
Exactly. Dr. Maya is designed to give the patient the clinical confidence to understand their viral symptoms at home, effectively starving the clinical system of that unnecessary foot traffic.
Okay, let me try an analogy here to ground this. If the entire medical system is a massive, lumbering, highly expensive cruise ship.
Okay, I like this.
MayaMD is a shiny, multi-million-dollar engine that the executives install in the hull to make the ship run faster, process passengers quicker, and sell more tickets at the buffet.
Right.
But Dr. Maya is a rogue guy standing on the deck handing out free, high-powered speedboats so the passengers can just drop into the water and drive themselves home.
That captures the dynamic perfectly. MayaMD optimizes the cruise ship's operations. Dr. Maya aims to render the cruise ship entirely unnecessary for a vast majority of the passengers.
And this brings us to a really critical tension point highlighted in the sources regarding the danger of confusion. Because naming a B2B product, Maya, when Dr. Srivatsa has already created, published, and copyright protected a direct patient triage tool with that exact same name, is described as more than just a trademark dispute.
It is described as actively detrimental, potentially inflicting real harm.
Explain that. How does a name cause harm?
Consider the vulnerability of the end user. Imagine you are a patient experiencing extreme health anxiety at 2 in the morning. You are trying to find Dr. Maya to independently triage your symptoms so you can find the confidence to stay home and avoid a panic-induced hospital bill.
Right.
If you accidentally download or interface with MayaMD, a platform fundamentally designed to feed you right back into a traditional clinical workflow, the entire goal of bypassing that fear-driven medical dependency evaporates.
Right, you were desperately looking for the speedboat to escape, but you accidentally just bought an upgraded ticket to the ship's medical bay.
Exactly. It completely subverts the mission of patient empowerment.
So if we want to actually use this speedboat, if we want to bypass the traditional diagnostic system, we need to understand how Dr. Maya actually works under the hood.
Yes, the mechanics of it.
Because to give a patient that level of confidence, it must require a completely different technological architecture than the standard symptom checkers we see on WebMD or Mayo Clinic, right?
It requires a fundamental shift in logic. Standard symptom checkers usually rely on algorithmic decision trees, and they are incredibly brittle.
Brittle in what way?
They operate by asking you a series of binary yes or no questions. Do you have a headache? Yes. Is your vision blurry? No.
Yeah.
Does your neck hurt? Yes. It just forces you down a rigid, predetermined path.
But human biology isn't binary. You don't just have one isolated symptom that cleanly leads to one isolated disease.
No, and seasoned physicians do not think in binary terms either. Dr. Maya relies on something called a triad methodology.
A triad, meaning 3.
Yes. And this framework wasn't just invented overnight by the software developer. Dr. Srivatsa evolved this from the Pediatric Assessment Tool, or PAT, which he originally developed within the UK National Health Service way back in 1996. The triad methodology looks for complex, interconnected patterns rather than reacting to single, isolated symptoms.
I love the analogy they use in the materials here. It's like music.
It is a great analogy.
Yeah, a standard health app hears one single note, let's say a C, and it desperately tries to guess the entire song based on that one note. It could be Beethoven, it could be the Beatles. It just panics and lists every possibility.
Which causes the hypochondria.
Right. But Dr. Maya waits. It listens for 3 notes played together, a C, an E, and a G. It listens for a specific chord.
That is the essence of clinical pattern recognition. The sources provide a very clear clinical example of this chord. Fever plus neck stiffness plus confusion.
Oh, that's a bad combo.
It is. That specific triad of symptoms is the classic chord for meningitis. When the AI system recognizes that complete triad, it doesn't need to guess among 100 possibilities. It knows the clinical pattern.
So it's much more accurate.
Yes. This drastically reduces diagnostic uncertainty and, crucially, prevents the AI from terrifying the patient over a single benign symptom, like a mild fever.
But when it recognizes that dangerous chord, it doesn't just spit out the word meningitis in scary Latin terminology and leave you to panic, does it?
No, and that is where the user interface becomes a tool for empowerment rather than intimidation. Complex medical jargon is historically used to maintain authority over the patient, to enforce this information asymmetry. To bypass this, Dr. Maya uses a universally understood, color-coded triage system.
Red, yellow, green, and blue. Walk us through how a patient interacts with these.
It translates complex medical triads into immediate action steps. Red means high danger. Go to the hospital or consult a doctor urgently.
Okay, that's obvious.
Yellow indicates caution. This is a scenario for self-care at home, or perhaps consulting a local pharmacist for over-the-counter relief. Green indicates mild symptoms, where you simply observe the progression or seek advice from a community nurse.
But the most fascinating and disruptive innovation in this system is the blue code.
The blue code is incredible.
It's described as a massive public health tool. How does it work?
Blue means infection control. Isolate. Consider the mechanics of a viral outbreak or a pandemic. If a patient inputs a triad of symptoms that hits a blue code, the app simply and firmly tells the user to stay home, isolate, and manage symptoms.
Wow.
It actively prevents them from traveling to a crowded hospital waiting room where they will inevitably infect a dozen other vulnerable people.
It cuts the chain of transmission right at the source. And by keeping them home, it simultaneously starves the hospitals of that unnecessary panicked foot traffic.
Which brings us to a profound economic friction point.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. I was thinking about this while reading the sources. If a tool like Dr. Maya works this well, if it can stop disease transmission, if it can eliminate cyberchondria, if it can save the government billions in wasted time and resources, why isn't this the standard of care?
It's a great question.
Why isn't every hospital in the world handing out this app at the front door?
To answer that, we must shift our lens from software technology to institutional economics, specifically drawing from the theories presented in the YouTube documentary source. And we are looking at the psychological profile of modern healthcare.
And it's worth noting here, we need to be really clear, this documentary paints a pretty Machiavellian picture of hospital economics.
Yes, it is a very specific, critical viewpoint.
Right. We aren't saying every single doctor or nurse is out to get you. The frontline workers are trying to save lives. But looking at the massive corporate system through this purely economic lens explains a lot of the friction and resistance these direct-to-patient AI tools are facing.
The central claim in the documentary is that the modern medical system is structurally incentivized to maintain information asymmetry.
Meaning they know everything and you know nothing.
Exactly. The system thrives economically when the institution holds a monopoly on knowledge and the patient holds none. This inherent paternalism creates an environment where you, the patient, are conditioned to feel fundamentally incapable of understanding your own biology.
Because if you fully understand your own biology and you can triage yourself with an app, you don't need to pay an institution a massive premium to explain it to you.
That is the economic threat. The sources describe the severe cognitive dissonance experienced by medical administrators when a free, downloadable software tool effectively does what their multi-million-dollar diagnostic wings do.
It makes them obsolete.
A tool like Dr. Maya, which keeps people safely at home using the blue and yellow codes, poses an active structural threat to the massive debt repayments of global hospital networks.
Let's play that out. If you're a hospital administrator, you have a massive building, expensive MRI machines, and millions of dollars in payroll and overhead to meet this month. You absolutely need a high volume of patients coming through the doors.
You need heads and beds.
Right. You need the foot traffic to generate billable events. If a rogue AI app is suddenly telling 40% of the community to just stay in bed, drink fluids, and rest because their symptoms are coded green, you are staring down a financial crisis.
The theory posits that the system is economically addicted to monetizing fear. If a patient is anxious, the traditional system monetizes the alleviation of that anxiety through expensive diagnostic testing, specialist referrals, and facility fees.
So how does a patient empowerment tool actually survive this environment? If the institutional gatekeepers see it as a financial threat, how do you get the speedboats to the passengers?
Well, you realize that asking the gatekeepers for permission is a dead end. They will never approve it. The sources detail a highly specific 12-month bypass strategy. It is essentially a blueprint for starving the matrix.
Starving the matrix. I love that phrasing.
It does not begin by trying to pitch Dr. Maya to a hospital purchasing committee or a medical board. It starts entirely at the grassroots level.
Bypassing the hospital entirely, how does that work in practice?
You deploy the tool to community health workers, people who are already embedded and trusted in their local neighborhoods, but who may not have formal medical degrees. You empower them with the AI to confidently handle the green and yellow cases right there in the community.
So imagine a community worker in a rural area or a dense urban neighborhood. Someone comes to them feeling sick. Instead of telling them to go wait in an ER for 6 hours, the worker uses the AI, sees it's a yellow code, and says, hey, we can handle this right here with over-the-counter remedies.
Exactly. You prove the math in the real world.
And build a data set.
Yes. You gather the data.
Yeah.
You build a massive, undeniable data set, proving that the community can safely resolve a vast percentage of ailments without ever stepping foot inside the hospital. And the final step of this 12-month bypass strategy is where the true leverage lies.
Who do you take the data to?
Once you have that data, you don't take it back to the doctors. You take it directly to the government.
Why the government?
Because you prove to the state that this AI functions as a macroeconomic audit tool. Think about a country with public or heavily subsidized healthcare, like the UK or parts of the US system. The government is the entity actually paying the massive hospital bills. They are hemorrhaging funds on fraudulent billing, over-testing, and unnecessary hospital admissions.
I see where this is going.
If the government can look at the AI's decentralized data and see that millions of citizens safely triage themselves at home for a specific set of symptoms, they can cross-reference that with hospital records.
Oh, wow.
They can instantly identify which hospitals are artificially padding their bills by admitting patients with those exact same mild symptoms who didn't actually need to be there.
It exposes the fraud.
The AI transforms from a simple diagnostic app into a financial shield for public funds.
That flips the script entirely. It uses the symptom data not as a medical device to be regulated and suppressed by the doctors, but as an economic audit tool to hold the entire system accountable.
But for any of this macro-level change to occur, a micro-level shift has to happen first.
Right, for the individual.
Exactly. For you, the listener, to actually utilize that speedboat and break away from the paternalistic model, you have to reclaim your own health literacy. You can no longer afford to passively accept a diagnosis just because it's printed on official letterhead.
You have to know what you're looking at.
You must understand how doctors think. And more importantly, you must understand the exact mechanisms of how they make mistakes when interpreting your diagnostic tests.
So what does this actually look like in a doctor's office? This brings us to the science of clinical reasoning. And I have to admit, reading through the peer-reviewed sources on this was a massive reality check for me.
It shatters a lot of illusions.
It really does, because my instinct, and I think most people's instinct, is to view a blood test or an X-ray as pure, objective math. You draw the blood, you put it in the expensive machine, the machine prints out a number, and that number tells you exactly what is broken.
That is a very comforting illusion, but the medical literature on clinical reasoning shatters it entirely. Clinical data gathering and the interpretation of diagnostic tests is a profoundly imperfect, non-exact science.
Imperfect how?
It is a highly subjective cognitive process. It relies heavily on the human brain of the physician, which means it is vulnerable to all the flaws of human cognition.
Walk me through this. How does a diagnosis actually form in a doctor's brain, according to the research? Let's say I walk into a clinic complaining of chest pain.
The clinical reasoning process generally follows 4 distinct steps. The very first step is hypothesis generation.
Okay, forming a theory.
Right? The moment you state your symptom, chest pain, the doctor's brain instantly starts forming mental frameworks to explain it. But this hypothesis is not just based on textbook medical knowledge. It is immediately influenced by their biases, their recent patient encounters, and demographic assumptions.
Okay, let's put a hypothetical on this to show the bias. Imagine a 50-year-old overweight man walks in complaining of chest pain versus a 20-year-old highly athletic woman complaining of the exact same chest pain.
The initial hypothesis generation diverges instantly. For the older man, the doctor's brain immediately jumps to a cardiac event, heart attack. For the young woman, the doctor's brain might jump to anxiety or a muscle strain.
Even though the symptom is identical.
Yes. The diagnostic pathway is already biased by demographic stereotyping within seconds.
And what's step 2?
Step 2 is case building, or refinement. The doctor begins asking questions or doing a physical exam to gather data. But crucially, they're often gathering data specifically to see if it fits the hypothesis they already formed in step 1.
They are trying to make the puzzle pieces fit the picture they've already painted in their head. Confirmation bias.
Precisely. Step 3 is diagnostic testing, ordering the blood labs or the scans. But even here, the doctor must apply what the literature calls the threshold concept.
What does that mean?
They are constantly weighing the statistical likelihood of the disease against the potential risks, costs, and benefits of the test itself. They don't test for everything. They test for what they think you have.
Which goes right back to the biased hypothesis.
Yes. And finally, step 4 is causal reasoning, tying all these clinical variables together to form a coherent cause and effect relationship based on pathophysiology.
That 4-step process sounds logical in a vacuum, but the sources outline some massive, dangerous cognitive pitfalls in this routine. Where does the machine break down?
The literature explicitly catalogs several major pitfalls. The first, and perhaps the most widespread in modern rushed clinics, is treating the numbers and not the patient.
Treating the numbers.
This is an over-reliance on statistics or lab values while completely ignoring the actual clinical presentation of the suffering human sitting in front of them.
So if the paper says you're fine, the doctor decides you're fine, even if you are visibly shaking and fatigued, treating the piece of paper.
Yes, and that ties directly into another major pitfall, premature closure.
Premature closure.
This is when a doctor locks onto a diagnosis far too early in the process. They get an initial idea, maybe based on that biased hypothesis generation, and they simply stop considering alternative explanations. Even when new, conflicting data arises, their brain, rejects it.
Do you have an example of that?
Imagine a patient with a history of generalized anxiety disorder who comes in with a racing heart and sweating. The doctor prematurely closes on panic attack and completely misses a critical thyroid storm or a cardiac arrhythmia.
Because the doctor's brain just says, oh, it's the anxious patient again. Give them a sedative.
Exactly. There is also the trap of attempting to force multiple, complex, disparate symptoms into one single unifying diagnosis.
Trying to tie it all up in a neat bow.
Right. Medical training often emphasizes finding one elegant answer, but in reality, a patient might have 2 or 3 entirely separate pathological processes occurring simultaneously.
So if a doctor is fatigued at the end of a 12-hour shift, or relying heavily on demographic bias, or just mentally locking in too fast to clear the waiting room, that supposedly objective lab test suddenly becomes a weapon of misdiagnosis.
It is used to dismiss you.
And this is exactly why patients desperately need health literacy. You have to act as the final check and balance. You have to be able to say, wait, look at this other note in the cord. You are missing the bigger picture.
Because if you blindly accept the paternalistic model, the idea that only the physician is capable of understanding the machine, you render yourself entirely vulnerable to these specific cognitive errors.
Which brings us to the NHS guidelines on interpreting iron levels.
A perfect example.
It really is. This is a highly specific, universally common case study that perfectly illustrates the profound danger of treating the numbers instead of the patient. The ferritin trap.
The ferritin trap.
I found this section of the source material absolutely mind-blowing because fatigue and iron issues are something millions of people deal with every day. It's so common. So let's set the stage for the listener. What is ferritin?
Ferritin is a specialized protein that stores iron inside your cells, keeping it in a safe, non-toxic form until your body needs it to make red blood cells.
Okay, it's a storage protein.
In a standard blood test, measuring your serum ferritin is used as a surrogate marker to estimate your body's total iron stores. In a perfectly healthy, baseline individual, the ferritin value on the page is directly proportional to the amount of iron you have banked away in your tissues.
Okay, so on the surface, it seems incredibly simple. I looked at the NHS guidelines. They state that a low ferritin number, specifically, less than 11 micrograms per liter for women and less than 24 micrograms per liter for men, confirms iron deficiency.
Right.
So if I get my test back and my number is 9, I'm deficient. Give me an iron pill. If my number is 40, I am fine. Send me home. It's binary, right?
And that assumption is exactly where the trap snaps shut. That is the definition of treating the numbers.
Why? What's the trap?
The critical biological nuance that many rush practitioners miss is that ferritin is what immunologists call an acute phase protein.
Okay, I need an ELI 5 on that. Explain it like I'm 5. What is an acute phase protein?
Think of an acute phase protein as a biological defense mechanism. When your body senses systemic stress, and by stress I mean acute or chronic inflammation, an active infection, chronic kidney disease, liver disease, an autoimmune flare-up, or even just excessive alcohol intake, your liver rapidly pumps out acute phase proteins.
And ferritin is one of them.
Ferritin is one of them. Your body artificially raises its ferritin levels to hoard iron, hiding it away so that invading bacteria or pathogens can't use it to replicate.
Wait a minute. So if I have a hidden infection or my joints are inflamed from an autoimmune issue or my liver is stressed, my ferritin number on the blood test will artificially inflate, even if I actually have 0 usable iron in my body.
Yes. You could be severely, dangerously iron deficient at a cellular level, but because you have underlying inflammation, your ferritin number might read as 45 or 60 or even higher.
Which is technically right in the middle of the normal range on the lab report.
The NHS guidelines are very clear about this danger. They explicitly define a massive indeterminate range for ferritin.
How big is the range?
For women, it is anywhere between 11 and 100 micrograms per liter. For men, it is 24 to 100.
That's a huge window.
It is. If your ferritin falls anywhere in this huge indeterminate range, a doctor suffering from premature closure, looking only at the numbers, might just check a box that says normal iron and dismiss your fatigue as a psychiatric issue.
They'll say you're just depressed.
Exactly. But the guidelines state that in this range, the influence of inflammation absolutely must be excluded. The inflammation could be entirely masking a severe iron deficiency.
This is exactly why the patient has to be armed with the speedboat of health literacy. If you are sitting in that clinic and you feel terrible, you know your body, you have the profound symptoms of iron deficiency, and the doctor points at the paper and says, well, your ferritin is 50, your iron is completely fine, it must be depression, here is a prescription for an SSRI. An informed patient knows how to stop that misdiagnosis in its tracks.
An informed patient knows to ask two vital, highly specific questions to break that cognitive trap.
Okay, what is the first question?
First, you ask, did you check my CRP?
CRP, what does that stand for?
CRP stands for C-reactive protein. It is a direct, highly sensitive marker of systemic inflammation. If your CRP is elevated, it proves that your normal ferritin reading is completely unreliable. It is a false positive.
Okay, so I ask about the CRP, the doctor checks it, and lo and behold, it's high. I have hidden inflammation. Now what? Am I just stuck in diagnostic limbo because my ferritin is unreadable? What is the second question?
The second question breaks the limbo entirely. You ask, did you check my transferrin saturation?
Transferrin saturation.
Yes. The NHS guidelines clearly state that where there is diagnostic doubt, transferrin saturation must be tested. Transferrin is the transport protein that carries iron through your bloodstream. The saturation percentage tells you how much iron is actually available for your body to use right now.
So it bypasses the storage protein illusion.
Precisely. If your transferrin saturation is below 16%, it confirms absolute iron deficiency completely, regardless of how high or normal your ferritin number looks.
That is incredible. A single question, what is my transferrin saturation, could literally save someone from years of misdiagnosed, debilitating fatigue.
It happened all the time.
It perfectly highlights why you cannot be a passive passenger on the cruise ship. You have to recognize when the instrument panel is lying to the captain.
And if the lab tests can lie or be misread by a biased observer, what is the ultimate undeniable source of truth?
The patient.
Exactly. This brings us full circle to the core philosophy of Dr. Maya and the triad methodology. The ultimate source of truth is not the paper, it is the patient's own body. It is the clustering of your actual lived symptoms.
Which brings us to a really fascinating concept in the sources, non-anemic iron deficiency, recognizing the invisible, because, again, the institutional medical system likes to wait for the x-ray to show a violently broken bone. They like to wait until things are undeniably disastrous before they take action.
That is a hallmark of the current paradigm. The traditional medical establishment relies heavily on hemoglobin levels to formally diagnose anemia.
Hemoglobin, that's what carries the oxygen.
Right. Hemoglobin is the protein in your red blood cells that carries oxygen. The guidelines state that anemia is defined as hemoglobin dropping below 120 grams per liter for non-pregnant women and below 130 for men.
But the sources are very clear that you can be suffering profoundly long before you ever hit those catastrophic numbers.
Vastly before. You can be severely iron deficient, completely depleted of your cellular iron stores long before your hemoglobin drops enough for a doctor to officially classify you as anemic.
Why is there such a delay?
Your body is highly intelligent. It prioritizes keeping hemoglobin levels up as long as possible because it absolutely needs to carry oxygen to keep you alive. To maintain that hemoglobin, it will mercilessly drain every other iron reserve in your body. It will pull iron from your tissues, your muscles, your hair follicles, and your brain before it ever lets the hemoglobin drop.
So your body is basically running on absolute empty. The engine block is melting, but the check engine light for hemoglobin hasn't flickered on yet.
That's exactly what's happening.
What does that actually feel like? Because this is where we have to look for the symptom chord. If the tests are lagging, how do we spot the triad?
The clinical guidelines list a very specific cluster of seemingly non-specific symptoms that define non-anemic iron deficiency. It is a distinct chord of distress.
What are the notes in the chord?
It includes intense, unexplainable fatigue, poor attention or memory loss, what patients often describe as a heavy brain fog, a surprisingly sore or inflamed tongue.
On sore tongue.
Yes, glossitis. Also, poor condition of the skin and brittle, spoon-shaped nails. Noticeable distressing hair loss. Delayed wound healing. And a very specific neurological symptom, restless legs syndrome.
Restless legs. That is such a specific, almost bizarre symptom to associate with iron.
It is, but it's a huge red flag.
But if you have restless legs at night, your hair is falling out in the shower, and you have constant brain fog. That is the triad. That is the chord. If you recognize that pattern in yourself, you don't have to wait for your hemoglobin to crash and for red flag anemia to develop.
No, you can advocate for early testing. You can walk in and demand that transferrin saturation test.
And, perhaps more importantly, recognizing that symptom cluster allows you to take control of your own treatment immediately, at home. This aligns perfectly with the yellow code of Dr. Maya self-care and health literacy. If you are symptomatic but not yet severely anemic requiring intravenous iron, the sources provide highly actionable, evidence-based steps for dietary hacking.
Yes, you can manipulate your own absorption.
Let's get into the dietary hacks, because this isn't just a generic eat more spinach public service announcement. There is actual fascinating biochemical strategy here. The sources draw a massive distinction between two types of dietary iron heme and non-heme.
The distinction is critical for absorption. Heme iron is found exclusively in animal tissue red meats, like beef and lamb, liver, and certain fish.
And it's easier to absorb.
It is highly bioavailable, meaning your human digestive tract recognizes it and absorbs it very efficiently. Non-heme iron, on the other hand, is found in plant sources, dark leafy greens, vegetables, beans, lentils, and fortified cereals.
Okay.
Non-heme iron is much harder for your body to break down, extract, and absorb into the bloodstream.
But the sources highlight some really incredible biological quirks on how you can manipulate your own digestion to boost that absorption. It's literally hacking your gut chemistry.
It is entirely chemical manipulation. For example, consuming ascorbic acid vitamin C alongside iron-rich foods drastically alters the chemical state of the iron in your gut, significantly increasing absorption.
So a glass of orange juice with your spinach.
Yes. But even more interestingly, if you consume heme iron, say a small portion of beef, at the exact same time as non-heme iron, like a side of lentils or cabbage, the presence of the animal tissue actually acts as a biological catalyst.
Wait, really?
Yes, it actively increases your body's ability to absorb the stubborn plant-based iron.
That is wild. The meat literally unlocks the iron trapped in the vegetables. But there are also massive traps here, right? Things that actively block your body from absorbing iron even if you are eating a perfectly iron-rich diet.
Yes, and these traps involve incredibly common, everyday dietary habits. The clinical guidelines explicitly state that iron absorption is severely inhibited or blocked entirely by fizzy drinks, large quantities of milk and dairy foods, and crucially, tea and coffee.
Tea and coffee block it.
Entirely. The tannins and polyphenols in tea and coffee bind tightly to the iron in your stomach and prevent it from crossing the intestinal wall. Additionally, over-the-counter antacid medications used for indigestion neutralize your stomach acid, and you absolutely require high stomach acid to break down iron.
Okay, let's paint a picture of how this goes wrong in daily life.
Right.
Imagine a listener who is feeling exhausted. They recognize the fatigue. They think, I need iron. So for lunch, they eat a massive, healthy spinach salad.
Okay, sounds good so far.
But they wash it down with a huge iced coffee. And because the coffee gives them heartburn, they pop a calcium antacid tablet right afterward. What just happened in their stomach?
Biochemically speaking, they just orchestrated a disaster for their iron levels. The polyphenols in the coffee bound to whatever small amount of non-heme iron was in the spinach, and the antacid completely neutralized the stomach acid needed to extract it.
Because they got nothing.
They absorbed virtually zero iron from that meal. They're just spinning your wheels, completely unaware that their beverage choice is keeping them sick.
That is such a vivid example of health literacy in action. Knowing that you shouldn't drink an iced coffee with your iron supplement, knowing the biological difference between heme and non-heme, knowing to ask your doctor for a CRP test when your ferritin looks normal but you fail like garbage.
It is all connected.
This is the granular, everyday application of the patient empowerment philosophy that tools like Dr. Maya are built to support.
It is about reclaiming agency. It is moving from being a passive, uninformed passenger on the institutional cruise ship to actively piloting your own speedboat.
Okay, let's pull all the way back and look at the incredible journey we've been on today. We started at the macro level turf war. On one side, we explored the B2B institutional AI, MayaMD, a neurosymbolic engine designed to make the hospital's billing and intake matrix run faster and keep patients tethered to the clinic.
Right.
On the exact opposite side, we looked at Dr. Maya, a direct-to-patient tool born from a priest-healer lineage designed to bypass the medical monopoly, combat the monetization of cyberchondria, and give diagnostic triage power directly back to the community using that brilliant color-coded triad logic.
And from understanding that technological split, we examine the deep cognitive vulnerabilities inherent in traditional human clinical reasoning. We looked at how demographic biases warp hypothesis generation, the danger of premature closure, and the sheer peril of treating numbers instead of human patients.
Which we saw clearly with the iron tests.
Yes. We proved exactly why those vulnerabilities are so dangerous by diving into the micro-level biology of the ferritin trap. We saw how hidden inflammation can completely mask severe cellular iron deficiency on a lab report, and how understanding your own symptom cord, The undeniable link between restless legs, hair loss, and brain fog is your absolute best defense against medical oversight and dismissal.
We have covered the macroeconomics, the AI technology, the psychology of doctors, and the cellular biology of your own gut. But before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with something to really chew on. A provocative thought to mull over while you go about your day, building on everything we've unpacked here about data and authority.
If we project this shift forward, this democratization of health data, as tools like Dr. Maya inevitably scale globally, giving hundreds of millions of individuals the ability to accurately log, interpret, and resolve their own symptom triads at home, what happens to the monolithic, slow-moving structure of traditional medical research?
That's a huge question.
Currently, clinical trials and the entire foundation of evidence-based medicine are dictated by the institutions. They draw data only from the specific localized patients who cross their thresholds and enter their billing systems. But if the ultimate, most comprehensive authority on human symptoms shifts away from the doctor's clipboard in the centralized hospital and becomes a global, decentralized, real-time digital database of patient experiences at home, will the future of evidence-based medicine be written by the patients themselves rather than the institutions?
Will the passengers eventually just realize they don't need the cruise ship because they can build their own ocean? It brings us right back to where we started. That glowing X-ray machine, that printed lab report of modern medicine, it is projecting a very specific, highly curated black and white image of what your health is supposed to look like.
But it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. When you step back, when you grab your own flashlight, build your health literacy, and start looking at the muddy waters yourself, you realize the picture is infinitely more complex.
Yeah.
And the power to navigate it has actually been in your hands all along. You just needed the right map.